Yeah, Tonglen, stillness, and meta. How have these? How do you feel like? Have you noticed any trends in your relationships with people as you started this practice?
Certainly, and those practices there, I put in as categories to things I've gotten from meditation over the years, right? And I found those in different Buddhist methods that I've attempted over the years, mostly Shambhala, which is in Center City, Philadelphia. When I first got into meditation, I did some more formal practice there. Like I would do formal sits, I would take some weekend retreats, and they talked about those different techniques. But I just sort of look at those as like broad categories of things that you could do to nurture that positive psychology, that positivity. There are certainly more, but they made sense to me to include. So, without the using the fancy kind of Eastern terms of Tonglen or metta, I mean, it's really just love or kindness and compassion. Like just
Yeah.
trying to cultivate those things. And I just wanted to tie them into some practices that had already been established
Okay.
and that I had done a little bit of work with, and I do appreciate that they go way deeper if you really get into the Buddhist way of life and looking at those practices. But just to use that terminology to tie into some already established practices. But if you take that terminology out, it's just really like cultivating more of a loving kindness type of idea towards others and compassion towards others. So I find that to be super important when you work with other individuals for a living.
Yeah.
And especially in physical therapy, there can be a tendency to, if things aren't working well for your patient, that you blame the patient, right?
Externally.
And not even you don't always have the worst intentions in mind. It just sort of happens because you're trying to do everything
Yeah.
and you coming out of school. I know I had a mentality that I learned everything there was to learn, kind of, right? Because
Yeah.
everything in school was what all there was, right? And it's just so not true. So when you have that mentality, though, and you're trying to practice all that and it's not getting anywhere, you're gonna try to deflect that to others. And certainly, like, just the practice of meditation as a whole just let me reflect on being comfortable with paradox in a way. Like sometimes things don't have a perfect solution, right? Like there's complexity everywhere, and we just have
Yeah.
to be comfortable with that. Like trying to oversimplify and simplify with blame is not useful, and especially when you're trying to work with people, because what happens is you start to get just a pattern in your head of these are the people I can help, these are the people I can't, because you don't want to look any deeper at
Mm.
if something doesn't work, then you're deflecting it from what you can do or what you can change, and you're kind of deflecting on somebody else. And maybe that was just me, but I think that is actually kind of common in the field, and maybe in a lot of healthcare, because
Yeah.
healthcare stuff is complex. Like you're not always going to get great results because people are complex, and what they come in with is complex. So that's something that the practice of meditation has really helped me appreciate and actually practice, trying to mold the skills of like just looking at somebody else's perspective better, right? And you can do that through metta when you're just looking at another person and literally wishing them well,
Yeah.
no matter what. Like you can go through a progression where you're just wishing yourself well to wishing someone you actually might have some initial ill feelings towards, and having that practice and really reconciling with it, like really believing it as you are getting deeper and deeper into that. That can be super powerful, but it needs to be repeated,
Okay.
just like weight training needs to be repeated. Like you will get fit until you stop doing the things that got you fit, right?
Ah.
So you will train your mind, your emotions, your way of being in the world until you stop doing the things that got you there. Now, but it does carry over. I would say, like if you don't have if you've never been introduced to the practice, then there will be you don't even know what to practice. But like as you're introduced to the practice, like it's easier to come back to it. but you have to be in the practice for it to
Okay.
kind of resonate, because just the daily or dealings with other people will will bring up things that you naturally react to, right? And those natural reactions, they don't go away, but you can give yourself some space from them, and that's what I find these meditation practices do, and they all promote a form of positivity in my mind. So when I was looking at the idea of positive psychology and that specific acronym PERMA, and I look at the term positivity, I had to say, like, what does that mean to me, and what would be one of the best ways to cultivate that? So, meditation certainly, but meditation is this big, broad category, and so I was looking deeper at some of this contemplative meditation, which would look at how to just, have more empathy, more compassion, and just more kindness towards other.
Yeah. I mean, I think these are pretty brilliant practices because there are a lot of extra hard ways to try to change those aspects of yourself. Like, too often we try too hard to change, like, oh, I just need to be more patient.
Right.
And I think that also kind of translates into this message of, like, I'm not good enough as I am. Like, I need to become someone who is more patient. When we just repeat that to ourselves, it's not like a specific action item. It's just like a standard that we're now comparing ourselves with.
Sure. Yeah, and I like that.
But this is a practice where I think natural, as you've described it before, is a good word, because I think these are things we do anyways. Like metta, we have a spotlight, we shine a spotlight on people in our minds, and we think about, well, it might not be positive. We'd think about maybe a negative aspect. Like, we ruminate on, I guess it's called rumination when we might do that.
Yeah.
But this seems like a very natural, or a little bit more effortless way to cultivate these virtues otherwise.
So some of the things I've recently read up on, and I've seen in the research on, like, neurobiology and just, like, kind of brain science, is how you have almost like two separate areas of your brain. You have the kind of more instinctual brain, it's been referred to as like the lizard brain, and that's sort of the amygdala and areas like that, where they're more responsive, they're more instinctual, they're almost like more animal in nature. And then we have like the frontal lobe, which is for executive function and can allow us to, separate out some decisions, make some decisions, and not just respond instinctually. Well, I look at meditation as like a direct way to separate out those two brains, or to kind of maybe develop the brain that allows us to have a little bit more space from our instinctual patterns. And that has become very evident in my life, like, where it doesn't mean that you, like, don't have those instinctual patterns still. It just means that, like, without any form of practice to get away from those, or to actually separate yourself from those, you'll just be living that day over and over again. Like, it's like you have less and less control to act in any other way than your normal patterns. And so it's almost like you're on a rerun all day long, when you are able to practice and give yourself space from what you normally think would be right or wrong. Like, and you contemplate that, and you even go against the grain of what feels normal and what feels natural. You now at least give yourself a different option, right? Like, you can actually see the movie playing out and decide, which way to go, instead of just being puppeted by some, like, puppeteer, right? So that's the way I kind of look at meditation, and it's a very experience-oriented thing, not a faith-oriented thing, in my opinion. I mean, I think there's a little bit of faith to just trust the process in a way, right? To just do it and do it more and more. But then as you do it more and more, it just becomes very evident. Like, you're just seeing things a little bit more clearly. But with that clearness, it's not, there's less judgment, actually. Like, because you're not looking at things as right and wrong. You're just looking at things as relationships to each other. And it just becomes easier to see that, it makes sense to be kinder to people because you feel better. Right. And when you look at, like, compassion, it's just like if you have the opposite response, and you're not compassionate towards something, like as you look deeper at that, you look at that as also not useful, right? There's something that you're looking at where there's judgment there, but oftentimes it might be that you're judging something because it's comparing it to something you don't like about yourself, right? Like and it's very individual. Like it's for the person who's doing the meditation, not as a broad, well, everybody who meditates this way is going to get these realizations, but it certainly becomes a bit clearer on what's useful and what's not for your own happiness, your own well-being, right? But you need to take time to do that and to cultivate that, because you can't just say, okay, I'm going to be this person, I'm going to be that person, right? Just like you can't say, I'm going to be strong and not lift a weight. I'm going to be more mobile, I'm going to have more agility and not move and have a practice for it. Well, if you want to cultivate better qualities, or whatever you think of, whatever term you want to use, better or not, but it's just like something that might promote more positivity, you actually have to spend some time doing that. But the process of meditation is very much it's very inactive in many ways, where you actually have to be still and watch and observe, and in that observation comes more realization.
And so would you say through maybe the stillness practice, in your discussion of stillness, practicing stillness, you talk about like dialing down an overactive sympathetic nervous system, which would promote a faster response. You talk about slowing down and seeing different options and avenues to take when interacting with a person. Mm-hmm. Is that largely from your practice that falls into the stillness category, or would you say you've experienced that with the other two practices, the other styles?
I think all of the styles of meditation that I've experienced, they have certain common threads that, and one of them is just more presence, and that there is some type of object that you're just trying to stay present on. So it can be your breath, right, which would just be like a mindfulness practice of saying, I'm going to focus on breathing because that's always present within myself, and I'm just going to notice that. And then if I go off of that object of meditation, I bring it back, and you're just in that process of trying to be present. Well, you can do the same thing with the concept of loving kindness, the concept of compassion. So, whether you're using some type of mantra, which I wrote in there, that you're just reciting to yourself, it brings you a presence, but the presence is on a specific quality. And then when you're looking at something like stillness, the object of that meditation is just to notice, but not react in a way, right? Not move, be uncomfortable, be with your discomfort in many ways, and notice how it changes, right? So it's the stillness is to notice without reacting, because many times when we have a discomfort or some type of bodily sensation, there is an instinctual manner of adjusting ourselves, which is often a good thing, to take that away. But in that process, we don't learn about the nature of that feeling, about that sensation, right? So the stillness is just, that happens to be the object of the meditation, just like metta is the object of the metta meditation and compassion is the object of the Tonglen meditation. This just happens to be the thing that you are deciding to stay focused on, for lack of a better term. Okay. But all of those allow you to step back and experience things differently than you would if you were just in a reactionary mode.
Okay. But that is something that you found really coincides with the regular practice, like that ability?
Yeah, and I think of, we talked about broad categorization, right? And I think of meditation, mindfulness is just this broad category, right? It's like a broad category of, being present maybe, or cultivating, space from your normal reactions, right? And so anything that allows you to do that falls into the category of meditation. And then these would just be subcategories of that. And they all have that in common, that they are giving you space from your normal reactions. They're just doing that in different ways. I thought the idea of stillness to me, and this is just something I've noticed with getting a better understanding of the autonomic nervous system over the years, it just became very evident to me that a lot of the things that become uncomfortable and that you want to react to, that stillness can actually help with, tend to be tied into some type of fight or flight response to a small degree. So therefore, the opposite, to not respond, to be patient, to be still, is on that other wing of the autonomic response, is that parasympathetic response. So that was my take on something that I've experienced, but also just looking at like what are the normal responses that we get when we're in a more fight or flight mode, and what's the opposite there. And just really looking at the nature of the term fight or flight is it's action. It's not patience, right? It is to do something now. And its opposite then would be to be able to be still and not respond and be okay with that, because that demonstrates that you don't feel like there is an immediate threat. So it sort of works around this idea of threat. If you can be still and be relaxed and allow things to happen, you don't feel like there is a threat going on. So your body will respond in a way that is, kind of allows you to relax, that rest and digest side of things. If there is some version of a threat, and that doesn't even need to be a physical threat, but if your mind is always thinking about something that is threatening, promoting anxiety or something like that, then you have many of the physical responses that would be involved in that aggressive fight or flight response that would make you want to move. So when you're still and you're not moving, even though your body's asking you to move in different ways, you're cultivating that opposite wing of the autonomic nervous system.
Okay. Is there a relationship with, like in the movement continuum, reaching that pain threshold and approaching that threat response, especially with your clients? Is there a relationship between this stillness and what you encourage people to do at that point?
I think that there's a relationship in that you want to be aware of your pain, right? And aware of it is not to avoid, right? So in the movement continuum, I try to make clear that the idea is not to avoid pain, but to use pain, right? And in this case, because the intention is to just be still, no matter what, in a way. I mean, if you can't do that, then maybe the threat was so great that it made you move. But okay, it's to be a little bit more exploratory with discomfort. And I think that's a key word. It's not to say like, I'm not going to move no matter what. It's just to explore it and see it change. Because the practice will most likely show you, if you have an itch and you don't scratch the itch goes away, right? Or it changes in some way. If you have a discomfort in, your back, like your postural muscles are getting tired, it's not going to stay the same the whole time you hang out there. It will change. There's some ups and downs. So it doesn't become as static as we think. And then we can also watch our mind around discomfort. So if your back is getting tired or is painful from sitting for an extended period of time, what is going on in your head? Are you diagnosing it? Are you immediately putting some type of structural pathology to it? Or can you just like let it be and like feel the physical sensation separate from the story you're telling yourself about that physical sensation? And that's a difficult thing to do. And it's not, I can't give more instructions to say like, do it a certain way other than that's the intention. The intention is to be still and watch and be curious about things and try to separate out the physical sensations from some type of story of threat that you're telling yourself. And as you practice that more and more, you start to see that the stories you're telling yourself aren't always accurate, and oftentimes they're very inaccurate.
So a beginner of a stillness practice should approach with curiosity about discomfort and how they act. I give it a shot. The scratches, the itchiness, they did go for me, but the thing that got me was the dryness in that, like I need to swallow. And it was interesting to watch how much tension built up, and then my ears were getting warm, and I was like, I could feel my body taking over and just proceeding to swallow at a certain point.
Which is I mean, because some of these are very automatic responses, and like you don't win or lose in the process. You just notice, right?
Yeah.
And as you do it more, you'll find that you probably go longer before you have that reaction, right? So I do believe that these autonomic responses can be changed. They can be trained in a way. I don't think they're meant to be eliminated. It's not really about that. It's just to be, if there's less threat, if you view it as less of a threat, right? And that's not always like a very conscious thing, but the more you spend time cultivating a practice, you now are teaching your body that it's not as threatening, because you're coming back to it, and it's something you're doing voluntarily.
Yeah.
And it becomes less of a threat. So by nature, the autonomic nervous system isn't going to react in the same way. And I think that's the important thing to think of with the nervous system in general, but the body as a whole. We have a lot of ideas that are very finite around diagnosis, where like things are this way, this is my diagnosis, it's not going to change. And I don't really think the body works that way. Like we can define things that way because it might be simple to study something that's unchanging. But as you sit and are just present, you notice the fallacy of that, that things are always changing, right? Even the discomfort that you feel, or the urges that you feel, they are changing. They don't necessarily go on and off, but they're not the same the whole time. So that knowledge and that experience starts to change your relationship to discomfort, or change your relationship to something that you just take for granted, like a sneeze or a cough or an itch. Like if it itches, my hand can't be stopped to do it, right? Where it's like, it's not like somehow noble not to itch. It's just something that you notice that gives you a little bit more control of your situation, and can make you view things from a standpoint where we have a little bit more control than we thought.
Okay. So is that what you meant when you referred to like few allowable exceptions in this kind of practice?
Yeah. I mean, again, it's always a personal practice. So you want to listen to yourself in a way and just say like, okay, this is more than I can bear, I'm going to move. And that's totally fine. But the intention is to just try to explore it and see what happens, see if it changes. And a lot of times it will. In my experience, certainly that's been, I think, one of the most powerful practices that I've done through meditation, is just to sit with discomfort. Because for a while I was just so uncomfortable in sitting postures that I'd just always be fidgeting, and I would try to find the right posture. And then the longer you sit for, it's like harder and harder to do that. So it just became like, okay, I'm just going to stop trying and just watch. And I was like, oh, that actually helps quite a bit. But it's not perfect, because there's no such thing as perfect. It's just like that becomes its own meditation, right? And that meditation is just, anything can become a meditation, right? It's just about noticing and being present, yeah, being aware, not judging, right? Like all of those things. Right?
Just what? Do you have to go now, or?
Yeah, I got like 2 minutes.
Okay. Then I guess while we're on stillness, I was curious, just came up. Have you, since stillness is, the complete opposite of movement, have you felt like your stillness practice ever had any sort of influence on your movement practice?
Yes, I don't know that I would define stillness as the opposite of movement, but I think stillness is maybe the opposite of the fight or flight response in a way. But when we're still, we are still moving. And that, I think, is a really powerful practice to start to observe, right? Like you can feel your heart beating. You can even just try to sense the concept of fluid movement through your body, circulation, etc., the breath, right? So there's always movement happening, or we're dead, right? And that is like a constant. So I've definitely learned more over the years how important that internal movement is for our external movement, like for what we display, right? Because the movement that's going on inside of us creates a stabilizing force in many ways. So that's just something that, you can absolutely explore when you're more still, that appreciation for how internal dynamics affect external movement.
Okay.
All right. And then just from a standpoint of when you are looking at, when you're doing any movement practice, the goal would be in many ways to be more present in your body so that you can be aware of your position, et cetera. And I think that is cultivated through meditation, through non-movement, right? In many ways, like what you become very present of what you're feeling in your body. That carries over to things when you're more dynamic.
That makes sense.
Okay.
Well, I look forward to trying this out more.